Our theme, wandering in English romantic poetry, may seem rather diffuse, not to say woolly, to those needing precise definitions. Sometimes, in life as in art, we witness a phenomenon when recognizing the recurrence of patterns which we may or may not find an explanation for. If we can, fair enough, we construct a theory. If not, what then? Sometimes we ignore the recurrent patterns and pass them off as mere coincidences. But sometimes the recurrence is so insistent that we must stretch our minds and imaginations to accommodate the unexplained data in some way. What I'm driving at is this. In German poetry, the word wander appears in the titles of famous poems by Goethe and the Romantics, notably Wanderers Nachtlied, Wanderers Sturmlied, or Hölderlin's Der Wanderer. As we noted last week, the verb to wander, rather than the noun wanderer, is what frequently recurs in well-known poems in the English language. Verbs are somehow less conspicuous than nouns for some reason that perhaps a linguist could explain. I asked you last week to do a little private research on Wordsworth's celebrated poem beginning, "I wander as lonely as a cloud," so I propose to hold an open quiz on this subject. Dagmar, did Wordsworth read German poetry himself? Good question, Dagmar. Probably not very much, but his close friend Samuel T. Coleridge did, and in fact he and Wordsworth visited Germany in 1799. Goethe's influence on Wordsworth is most apparent in The Excursion and the figure of the wanderer who appears in it. Goethe's linkage of the wanderer with the question of the poet's nature and identity arguably influenced "I wandered lonely as a cloud." Now to my questions. My first question is, when was the poem written and which strophe was added later? It was written in 1904. It was published in 1807. The second stanza was added later, but I'm not sure exactly when. Thanks, John. Was it based on a real event in Wordsworth's life? Sheila? Yes, on a walk with his sister Dorothy beside the western banks of Ullswater. Dorothy recorded this event in her diary on April the 15th, 1802. Yes, thank you, Sheila. So we note that despite being prompted by a real experience, the poem diverges from the factual events in an important respect. Namely, Mary, yes. Lonely. I mean, the speaker in the poem is alone. Yes, Mary. To anyone who has compared the poem with Dorothy's entry, what other differences are there? Peter? In Dorothy's description, the weather was not as clement as the poem suggests. According to her, it was blustery and overcast. Good point, Peter. And what change of word betrays this difference? Breeze. The word breeze replaces the word wind in Dorothy's diary. But isn't that just hair-splitting? I mean, what's the great difference between wind and breeze? Ask your doctor. Oh, there is. They evoke different moods. Good, Mary. True, and another point. In poetry, one often correlates uses of the same word in different poems. Where else does the word occur in Wordsworth's poetry? Oh, in the opening passage of the prelude. Good, Mary, good. And we know that Milton's Paradise Lost served as the foil to several of the long epic poems written by the Romantics. The reference to the breeze in the prelude echoes Milton's evocation of the holy muse or spirit in Paradise Lost. Another question, though. What do daffodils describe? What do the daffodils described in the poem symbolize? Just pretty flowers, no more. Fiona, is that all you think? What about the descriptions of pretty flowers over the garden fence? Nobody bothers with them. What you mean is the inclusion of references to common things in poetry elevates them somehow. They join a tradition. I read an article saying that daffodils recall the myth of Narcissus. Ja, we say gelbe Narzissen in German. Yellow Narcissen? Yellow Narcissus? Yes, Dagmar, thank you for that. An interesting, illuminating point. I know the article Mary mentioned by Frederick Pottle. Fine. So the poem has a link with classical mythology. What about biblical and Christian traditions? Joanna? Yes, Houseman used the word Lenten lily to describe a daffodil in his poem of his. Good point. And as it happens, the walk Dorothy and William made together when they saw an impressive cluster of daffodils was on Green Thursday, the day preceding Good Friday. Oh yes, and in German we call daffodils Osterglocken, Easter bells. Ah, interesting. So we might conclude that the poem, at least subconsciously, welds biblical and classical strands. But to return to our chief question, what does the word wondered contribute to the poem? Mary again, yes? The word suggests to my mind a spiritual quest, like the biblical journey of the wandering Israelites to the Promised Land. The work I'm doing on my term paper emphasizes the religious connotations of wandering. Not all positive. What about Cain? Yes, the word is ambivalent. Its positive or negative connotations depend on its context, even in terms of seasons. Rodney, very good point. I fully agree with that. In Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, Puck is the merry wanderer of the night. But in the 18th sonnet, the line, "Thou wanderest in death's vale," draws a parallel with the late chills that follow winter. Well, I have to close today's session a little earlier today to attend a department conference, so we'll continue this discussion next time. Oh, and prepare notes on Blake's poem, London. We'll certainly find negative aspects of wandering there. Thank you. Oh, Miss Beckham, Mary, could I have a word with you? Dr. Panhurst called me Mary. Yes, Mary. You know about the inspection coming up in a couple of weeks. I find your contributions today show that you have some very interesting insights into our topic and romantic poetry in general. I was wondering if you could give a talk on romantic wandering during the inspection. It will be reviewed by video and could impress our potential benefactors. Well, I feel honoured, but there are still a few points I'm unsure of. Perhaps we could discuss them. Would you object if I asked to meet you for coffee somewhere? Not at all, Doctor. What about that quiet place near the ruined priory? Oh, I know the one. Fine.